It's the Sean Widmer Podcast. It's a journal by someone that just really doesn't like to write.
Thanks for tuning in to the Sean Widmer Podcast. Holy cow, it is 12:37 a.m. when I'm recording this, and there is something to it. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. I need to turn my headphone volume up there because I'm getting old and I can't hear anything. We start the podcast off before we talk about being up late, before we talk about dress clothes, before we give our shout out to my buddy Dan, all of that. We say thank you to the Patreon members, the patrons over at patreon.com/Sean Widmer Podcast. Keep the lights on for this. Thank you for your support. Means the world to me. And because of you all, we get to have this thing continue. You also get access to Trivia 21 this week. I've been told by a couple people it was a really hard week. Read it and weep was the category. So go check it out. I thought it was a good week. I thought it was a fun week. I was happy with the questions. So go check it out. The music round I thought was maybe difficult. One person I talked to said it was hard. Two people messaged me that it was a perfect music round. Well, go deal with that. Thank you, Patreon members. I appreciate it. We look at 5-star reviews. Are there any 5-star reviews on iTunes? If there are new ones, we read them here, and you get to kick the podcast off. But nope, Nick still holds the title for the latest 5-star review, which means I have to come up with a shout-out. I'm going to give the shout-out today to my daughter, Olivia's Sixth Sense. Oh, man. Do all kids have this? Do all kids have this ability? My son goes to bed, my oldest son, Huck, goes to bed at 7 o'clock. Goes to bed. My daughter then goes to bed between 7:20 and 7:30. She's pretty tired by then, so that's when she goes to bed. And then Woods goes to bed right after that. So that's the order of operations here at the Widmer house. Everyone's asleep by 8 o'clock. It's great. So Tuesday nights, Mike and Robin come over. We play our board game Frosthaven. We have a good night. We catch up, play our game, chat. It's tons of fun. And I'm starting to do this now on Tuesday nights. I replaced my Dungeons and Dragons group with this. So tonight was my first night not going to that, hanging out with Mike and Robin. I was pumped about it. So I'm here to help out with dinner and bedtime and bath time and all that stuff. So we get Huck put down, and I'm going to put Olivia to bed. My daughter has this sixth sense that if something is happening after 8 o'clock in this house or in my life, my daughter sniffs it out immediately and becomes impossible to put to bed. And this is every time. This isn't just occasionally. Every time I have something to do or I'm excited about after 8 o'clock, my daughter will be awake forever. It's crazy. And so I even knew going in tonight, I was like, okay, just keep your vibe cool, stay calm, stay collected. Don't give off any excitement vibes. Let's treat it like a normal night. Let's just lay down and be cool. And so that's how I went in. I'm like, I felt like I was killing it. Oh, I felt like I had everything moderated in terms of my excitement. I laid down in her bed and she was like, do you want to jump? Do you want to jump? Do you want to play house with Bunny? Do you want to play hide and go seek? And I thought, oh, it's the night. And it was. She wouldn't do it. Wouldn't calm down, wouldn't shut the brain off. And sure enough, she stayed up until Mike and Robin got here, and I did the handoff to my wife. I was like, look, sorry. And so my wife finally got her to go to sleep, but it was like, she just knows it. Does every kid have this, or is it just my daughter? Killer. Tomorrow night's Survivor. I'm recording this on Tuesday night. Wednesday night is Survivor. Starts at 8 o'clock. My wife and I will want to watch at 8. You watch. When I report back on Friday, Olivia will have stayed up till 8:15 on Wednesday night. Just going to happen. She's going to sense it. Speaking of television, something that I was thinking about the other day, and I thought about it because I was on YouTube and on my homepage, the algorithm had spit up all over the place. No, the algorithm had thrown up all over the place. The algorithm on the main page had shown me a Jimmy Fallon video. And I used to watch the Jimmy Fallon YouTube videos all the time. I thought he was a great idea maker for my brain going into the morning show. And so I would always be watching the Jimmy Fallon videos because, one, I think he's very funny. I thought he had a great connection with his guests when he started. And I like late night television. And I haven't done that in forever. So a clip came up and I watched it and it was great. It was Jimmy Fallon doing Jimmy Fallon things. And I didn't love it as much as I used to, but I still enjoyed the video. And it took me back to a time when late night television was the biggest deal for me. And I loved it. So what did I do? I typed in Jimmy Fallon. I was just like, what's going on with that? And I typed in Jimmy Fallon to bring up maybe more of his videos and like see if they had like videos that have been popular lately. And instead it came up with an article from, let me see where this is from, Forbes magazine, titled "Late Night Talk Shows Are Turning into Next Day Recaps, but the Era's Not Over." So I didn't read the whole thing. I'll be honest. I was looking for Jimmy Fallon videos, not an article. But this intrigued me because it had the story that Jimmy Fallon is going from 5 days a week to 4 days a week. And I think Jimmy Kimmel is done. I don't know what the deal is with Stephen Colbert, but it does seem like the shows are going away. And I am right in the mix of what this title says. I was, in the 90s and early 2000s, an avid late night television viewer. Avid. I loved the late night shows. I loved Jay Leno and I loved Conan O'Brien. So when those two were back to back, I was watching it a lot. When I moved out of my house in 2000 and 2001 and moved in with Preston, we watched the late night shows. Not every night, but we would turn on the TV and check out Jay Leno. And we're up, at that age, we were up till 2:00 in the morning every night. So we'd tune into Conan and then whoever was after that. I think Carson Daly eventually had that. I'm trying to remember who had that to start with, but the Late Show. And we loved these. A chance to see the people that we saw on the big screen do interviews, fun games, and funny jokes. And now I understand why it is changing and why things are going away. We get to see these people do interviews all the time. They're always on a podcast. They're always on some kind of YouTube, internet show talking about life. We have more access to the celebrities that we enjoy. And for those of us who like pop culture, like me, we get to see them more often. So it's not just once in a blue moon you see a Brad Pitt interview. You see a lot of them now when he has a movie coming out, and occasionally even when he doesn't. So I understand that part of the late night changing. And I also understand the jokes and stuff. They're so easy to capture and throw up on the internet the next day. There's no reason to really watch the show live. It is way more enjoyable to watch the chunks of it, the segments they put up on YouTube. It's way more fun. It's way easier to do. And you're not up at 11:30. So I get all this, but it makes me sad because it was such a huge part of my life back in the day of getting excited. The news was on. I was like, oh, the news is so boring. I hate the news. You get the tiny little sports clip. Shout out Darnay Tripp. You get the tiny sports clip in the news and what's our local teams doing? This is great. Then I'd zone out for a couple minutes, come back when they started the late night band or the late night music. And Jay Leno would walk out and Kevin Eubanks would be sitting there playing some music and they'd banter for a second. Leno would go into his monologue. I would laugh. He'd do his headlines. He'd do whatever fun things he had planned in his monologue. Then he'd do his interviews and I loved it. Then Conan would come on. I thought Conan was so cutting edge. Oh, he was so cutting edge. His jokes were cutting edge. His monologue was cutting edge. The way he dealt with his guests was cutting edge. Oh, Conan was great. So then Conan goes to the main chair and maybe he lost his edge a bit. I don't know. I don't really remember what happened there. But that transition did not go great for Conan, right? And he eventually gets sent off to the Turner broadcast channels. And Jimmy Fallon, who had followed Conan, is doing the Late Show. If I'm recalling this correct, steps in and takes over for the Late Show. And Andy and I were in love with this. When Jimmy Fallon first started doing the Late Show, I would stay up late again. It was a resurgence for me to stay up and watch Jimmy Fallon because I found him to be so enjoyable and funny, and I loved the way he interacted with celebrities. I loved him. So anyways, this little walk down memory lane is brought to you by nothing besides the fact that I'm going to miss it, even though I haven't watched it in forever. As late night starts to go away, as Jimmy Fallon starts to go away and his show gets cut down to 4 days, and Jimmy Kimmel, who I never really watched, as he goes away, I understand that why this is happening. No one's watching. But there's the part of me that remembers those youthful years, the college years, right after college years, staying up super late and laughing my butt off to these guys. And this is just one of those things generationally I've got to let go. I've got to be okay with it being done. This was part of my generation. It's not part of the next generation. It's not part of what Olivia, Huck, Woods, this is not part of them. This is part of my life. This is part of my story. And I don't need to really be bummed about it because it doesn't need to keep going. They're going to find their thing that fills in their late night hours, and they'll have that. And maybe that will go away, and they can, be bummed out about it that their kids won't experience it. But I'm glad I got to experience the late night I got to watch. Now, really, if we're talking late night, the thing I miss the most is Blind Date. Blind Date, that run, I think it was Blind Date into Eliminate into the weigh-ins. Was that right? Is that a show? I think that was what it was. I think it was Blind Date, Eliminate, the weigh-ins. And I remember, this is at 42 right now, 12:48. My eyes are hardly staying open. Up way too late. Latest I've stayed up in a minute. I remember watching Blind Date, Eliminate, and then Blind Date, Eliminate, and then the weigh-ins, and then going and doing stuff. I can't even think about that now. I can't even think about that. But that's what it was. Anyways, I'm bummed out about the late night stuff. I was sad to type in Jimmy Fallon's name, and that's the first article that came up. They were great. I dug it. I was going to talk about dress clothes, but do I talk? You know what? I've been right all along about this. And I don't want to really say that because I do believe that if you are comfortable in a style of clothing, wear it. Wear it. And I guess I get bitter about this because for the most part, it feels like a lot of businesses lean towards the dressier clothes. And so they do not share my sentiment that if you feel good in it, wear it. The sentiment is dress up. And I now have a job where I have to wear a polo shirt or a collared shirt and tucked in with the pants and the belt. And I've said this forever, and I will stand by it. Polo shirts, but collar shirts, boy, they do. I can't do them justice. They do not work for me. I feel uncomfortable in them. My shoulders don't work in them. But the worst piece of clothing that exists is a belt. I hate them. They're the worst piece of clothing. Belts suck. There's not, you need them, I guess, for the look when you tuck your shirt in. I don't know why, but you got to have them. I guess if you buy pants that are too big, they do keep your pants up, but they suck. Undoing them to go to the bathroom, undoing them at the end of the day. I just feel like they're always a hindrance. I'm out on belts. Belts suck. So now that I'm wearing one every day, I never wore one for 20 years of work. Now that I wear one every day, I get it. It's part of the look. It's part of the wardrobe. It's part of the uniform. But they suck. All right, that's all. I needed to take a quick cheap shot at belts.
Kelly's, what are you into?
Jerky Dan, you son of a gun. Jerky Dan coming through. Jerky Dan sent me a message the other day, and he is back in the Eastern Washington area, and he sent me a message of the most amount of sliced meat I've ever seen. And he had all this thinly sliced meat all over his kitchen, right by his meat slicer. And I don't even know if it's a kitchen. It looks like it's a factory, meat factory. And so he sent me a picture of it. He's like, look what I'm doing. And I knew immediately what he was doing. Jerky Dan was making jerky. And I was like, that's the best jerky. He used to bring it into the radio station. We loved it. We would devour it in 5 minutes. And he goes, do you want some? I'm like, well, yeah, duh. Jerky Dan made jerky. He made regular. He made this super spicy, unbelievably tasty jerky. And he put that stuff in the mail. And I got it today. And oh my gosh, it is amazing to get jerky in the mail. So Jerky Dan, thank you. Washington jerky sent out here. I'm going to say totally illegally. And it came in today, busted that open, took a big bite, loved it. My daughter was like, oh, I want that. Can I have it? I said, it's too spicy, which you say to everything. It's that this Coca-Cola, it's too spicy. She's like, oh, I don't like spicy. I go, I know, dang it, sorry. But this time it was true. One of the jerkies is extremely knock your socks off spicy. But thank you, Jerky Dan. And it just continues in my brain. People who have a really good meat slicer, I'm so jealous. From the jerky situation that Dan does to a cheesesteak, to making the meat for a cheesesteak, to doing a really good Mongolian restaurant style stir fry with the really thinly sliced meat. I mean, that's what I love. A really heavy duty meat slicer, which Dan has. It was great. Thank you, Dan, for the jerky. It was so good. Okay, I got to bounce. Hey, we did it today. We're right around 15 minutes. Your favorite 15-minute podcast. We went right around 15 minutes. All right, thank you for listening. I very much appreciate it. I hope the rest of your week goes well. And feel free to leave a comment over at seanslife.com, over on Spotify, on YouTube. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching or listening, whatever it may be.